senior care in Minnesota. This crisis is real, and it is time to act. Minnesota's at a crossroads. In less than 5 years, 1 in 4 Minnesotans will be 65 or older. 70% of those seniors will need some form of long-term care. These aren't just numbers. These are our parents, grandparents, and loved ones. Many of us will need care like this ourselves someday. Yet instead of preparing for this reality, our sector faces devastating Medicaid cuts proposed by Governor Walz. The anticipated impacts of these proposed cuts amount to a funding shortfall for Minnesota nursing homes of $700 million over the next 4 years. Cuts like these would decimate our senior care sector and devastate our ability to meet the needs of Minnesota seniors now and into the future. Without immediate action, we won't have the workforce or resources to care for Minnesota seniors today or in the future. Let's be clear, senior care providers are being squeezed at every angle. An increasingly burdensome regulatory environment, an unelected board imposing costly rules while ignoring the feedback of experienced providers, and now a proposed budget that would gut funding for an already stretched sector. This doesn't sound like supporting seniors. It sounds like a plan to shut down nursing homes. And it is unacceptable. We will not stand by and let it happen. And we are grateful for the leadership of Representative Schumacher and Senator Hoffman, who put Minnesotans first. I'll now turn it over to Senator Hoffman.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for being here. 12 years ago, the demographer told the state of Minnesota the silver tsunami will be here. And so we've been saying for many, many years, the silver tsunami is coming. Well, not only is it here, but it's affecting. And what Carrie had said, 25% of our state's population is in that 65 or older place, right? So we start to talk about priorities. One, Minnesota should include people with disabilities, should include our elderly. And what we're saying is we are grouping together bipartisan to say, this doesn't need to happen this way. This is what we need you guys to be saying the same thing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me be here. And with this is our wonderful state rep, Joe Schumacher.
Good afternoon, I'm wonderful State Rep Joe Schumacher. From Laverne, Minnesota. I am the Republican chair for the Human Services Committee in the House. Here, glad to have bipartisan support on this effort and proud to be an advocate for seniors and the people who provide care for our seniors in this state. No one likes the idea of thinking about having to grow old and what that means, but there are opportunities to make it something that you can, if you can't get excited about it, at least be able to deal with it in a positive way. And the cuts that the governor is proposing in his budget will be devastating and takes away any chance to have that kind of idealism with the thought of growing old. When I talk to members of my own caucus on this, they're hearing from their centers already that with the cuts that the governor is proposing in his budget and what the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board is proposing without a check from the legislature, they will be closing down facilities throughout the state. And we're not at a point where we need to have that. We are at a point where we need to have these centers around to keep our communities strong all throughout Minnesota. And so we're glad to be able to work here on a bipartisan basis with people who are providing the types of care that we need and the people who are really doing the hard work for seniors. We're happy to stand side by side to make sure that these cuts do not happen.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Johnson, and I'm a registered nurse, and I am with LifeSpark. And I'm also the current board chair of Care Providers of Minnesota. LifeSpark provides long-term care to seniors throughout Minnesota across the spectrum of home health, hospice, assisted living, and nursing homes. I'm here today to highlight the destructive impact these Medicaid cuts will have on Minnesota seeking access to nursing care. LifeSpark operates 3 facilities in the state of Minnesota, which are projected to lose $10.6 million over the next 4 years. That's just in 3 facilities. The consequences of the governor's budget proposal could be severe and threatens the stability of our long-term care infrastructure. Our facilities will have incredibly hard decisions to make if this proposal becomes law. I care deeply for Minnesota seniors. I have began my career in this profession over 35 years ago, as many of you in this room have, as a certified nursing assistant. I became a nurse, and then I became an administrator. The joy that you have from working in long-term care is like no other. Every day you make a difference, and what we do is important, not just for the seniors, but for the families and their loved ones. The governor has expressed a vision for Minnesota as a great place to raise a family. However, it appears this vision overlooks the vital role that seniors play in our families and in our communities. With Minnesota's aging population growing, now is not the time to cut funding for senior care. We must do better for those in the twilight of their lives. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Griffin.
Thanks, Amanda. My name is Griffin Maslevicek. I'm the Director of Healthcare Operations at Mount Olivet Careview Home in Minneapolis, and I'm here to sound the alarm of the devastating impacts of these cuts to the seniors we serve. At Mount Olivet, we care for nearly 240 older adults. State funding supports essentials, food, activities, and basic services that uphold the dignity for our residents. Yet under Governor's budget, that funding would be slashed. For our facility alone, these cuts would mean $8 million loss over the next 4 years. The consequences: fewer resources for our residents, larger strain on our families, and an impossible burden on our caregivers. I was drawn to this field because I care deeply about seniors. Our seniors built the world we live in today. Because of this, I cannot remain silent as Governor Walz proposes devastating cuts. For me, this is not about politics, but it's about the people we are committed to serving together. We must step up and fund senior care. Doing anything less would not only be inconsistent with Minnesota values, but it would also mean that seniors across our state would stand to suffer further consequences.
Hello, thank you for being here. I'm Toby Pearson, President and CEO of Care Providers of Minnesota. I want to thank Representative Schumacher and Senator Hoffman for joining us today. Additionally, I want to thank our long-term care leaders who shared their stories here and who have been sharing their stories with legislators throughout the day. Standing here with Representative Schumacher and Senator Hoffman, two great advocates in the legislature for Minnesota's disadvantaged, reminds me of the work we did 9 years ago. At that time, Minnesota legislators came together in a bipartisan manner with a commitment to ensuring that seniors have access to quality care throughout the state. As Carrie started this off, Minnesota is at a crossroads. Today, the governor's budget proposes $700 million of cuts to nursing homes and adds nearly $200 million in unfunded mandates through an unelected, unresponsive board. These proposals threaten the ability of Minnesota seniors to access the care they need in the, they need and deserve in the community in which they wish to live. We urge legislators to remember that caring for seniors is not a partisan issue. Cuts to Medicaid funding for seniors are simply unacceptable, regardless of who presents them. Providing our elderly population with quality, life-saving support at the end of their years is a moral obligation, one that must be upheld, and the reason that we are all here today. Now is the time for the legislature to reaffirm its commitment to our aging population, stop the cuts to Minnesota seniors, and we ask legislators to reject the governor's proposal and craft a more thoughtful approach to ensuring care for our seniors. Thank you. If anybody has questions, or if they're going to come storming out of the room and ask questions,
One of the leaders, or Senator Hoffman, or one of the legislators, one of the reasons the governor is targeting this area for spending reductions is it's one of the faster growing areas of the state budget, and we're facing a potential deficit down the road. Do you have other alternative ways to provide the care that's needed and the resources needed while constraining costs, or other places you think we should be looking for cuts? Can you address that a little bit?
So 5 times the MMB person said probably when I asked them about how did you come about to your budget decisions on this. Here's the thing that perplexes me. Human Services budget accounts for 25.7% of the overall budget. And when you're talking about there probably will be a $2.3 billion deficit in 4 years, Where are we gonna get the money to cover that? Well, we're gonna take 1.5 billion of that from human services. That's 65% of the difference. It's not acceptable. That's the argument here. You're gonna articulate something, let's be fair across the board, right? And there's some other ways. There's various bills that are out there now that we're vetting actually in the Senate to take a look at. So to that question, to say, it's a fair game, let's play a fair game across the football field, right? Don't make me get to the 100-yard or get down 100 yards and start at the 5-yard line when everybody else gets to start at the 45-yard line. So that's how I kind of feel in this process. That makes sense? Don't.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I would just add that as we look at what the last few forecasts have shown is it's a lot less. The actual cost after the projection comes in tens of millions or hundreds of millions less than what is projected and what we have to budget for every time. And so there's always been this, I don't know, optimistic or pessimistic to look at what the driving cost is in that, and it never meets that. The long-term care facilities, people who are here today have been keeping those costs lower than what's been projected, even with an increase in demand in that. And so we don't see that as being as much the driver in the cost as some of the other areas that we're also having to look at.
Correct.
Could someone maybe speak a little more into like, you're talking about state cuts, but also how that federal funding might come into play, potential federal funding cuts for this sector?
It's the unknown, Joe. I mean, we were talking about that. We are good for 2 years, right? We're looking at Minnesota, we're good for 2 years. The things that we can control, we can control. What can we control is what's happening right now. I don't know what's happening on the federal. You hear the conversation about we're gonna cut Medicaid. Well, they did. The first congressional act was to move, what, $800 and some billion, and they're gonna go find it. There's no language on there for that, right? Roger Giroux, who was superintendent of Okanagan schools years ago, he said, you don't have a problem until you have a problem, but you better be studying the potential for those problems, right? And so in that case, we can control what we're doing here in Minnesota, and we think when you take 65% to cover your losses out of 25% is absolutely, the math ain't mathing on that one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would just add, I had Congresswoman Fishbach is here today, and she was having lunch with several of us from her delegation and talking about some of those pieces there. And she says that the focus is going to be on the waste, fraud, and abuse piece, not on nursing home programs or disability programs. It's going to be in the areas that are more inflated. And I guess to that point overall, we don't know exactly what the feds are going to be doing. We do know that the governor has proposed a 2% cap on rates for costs that were already spent 2 years ago or 18 months ago with that. And so we're seeing those. And I guess my point overall, and the point I keep making to my colleagues in the end too, is whatever the federal government does, they're not going to reward us by cutting today when we have to be looking at making decisions in the future as well. And so why make hasty decisions now or the direct and sharp cuts now when we do have to be looking at this in a serious way coming down the pike too.
Good job. That's exactly right.
I just think it's important to note that these seniors have spent down their life savings to receive this Medicaid benefit. I mean, it's hard for them, but they've had to, you know, everything they worked for, gone to get this Medicaid benefit.
We've talked about that one of the 17, you have 17 Medicaid mandates the state's supposed to do, right? And she just brought up the idea you spend down that piece of it. Hospitalization, inpatient, outpatient is one, nursing homes another one. Absolutely. It makes no sense, you know, it's like that, where's the common sense in that conversation? So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, we were reminded in our committee this morning that nursing home care is an entitlement at the federal level, that we are it's an entitlement to our seniors and we have to provide this care.
Any other questions? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.